Hello, everyone. Have you ever stood at what feels like the very bottom of your pain, yet felt a terrifying sense of peace in your heart? 7 years ago, I lost everything in one night: my love, my career, and my billion-dollar dream. Today, I'm standing here at my beloved father's funeral, and I know that this is not an ending. This is a reckoning. Before me, in the third row, is my younger sister, Chloe. Resplendent in a designer dress she certainly didn't buy herself, on the arm of the man who was once my everything, Ethan. He, a tech titan celebrated by all of Silicon Valley, the man who proposed to me under the lights of the Golden Gate Bridge and then ruthlessly stole my brainchild. I see a smug smile cross Chloe's lips as her eyes meet mine, a smile that says, "I won." After I finish my eulogy amidst the muffled sobs of those around me, Chloe approaches, close enough for only me to hear. Her voice is like honey-laced poison. It's a shame Dad didn't live to see Ethan take the company public. At least he saw one successful daughter. The blood in my veins feels like it's turning to ice, but I don't cry. I don't get angry. 7 years of pain have taught me that the best revenge isn't tears, but a calm smile. I look her straight in the eye and then look towards the back of the church, where a man in an elegant suit is watching quietly. I smile. "Chloe, I don't believe you've met my husband." "Leo," I call out, my voice loud enough to draw attention. "Could you come here?" A pause. The music swells more dramatically as Leo starts to walk forward. As Leo comes up, I see the color drain from Ethan's face. He freezes on the spot. The smug smile on his lips melts like beeswax near a flame. He stammers my husband's name, a name he never expected to hear here. Leo." "Oh," I say, my voice as casual as if I were commenting on the weather. "Ethan, surely you know Leo?" "My husband, the founder and managing partner of Valor Equity Partners. I'm sure you're familiar with them." I tilt my head, delivering the final blow. "They just finalized the acquisition of your debt-ridden company at 9 a.m. this morning. Perhaps you should check your email." That moment, the moment I watched his entire world collapse before his very eyes, is the beginning of this story. This isn't just a tale of revenge. This is my 7-year journey, from a betrayed and destroyed software engineer who had to flee her city with nothing, to the day I stand here with a true love and a strength I never knew I possessed. In today's video, I'm going to tell you the whole story. About how my billion-dollar dream was stolen, about how I hit rock bottom, and most importantly, about how I found the man who helped me rebuild an empire, even more brilliant than my dreams. So fasten your seatbelts, because we're about to begin a roller coaster of emotions, of betrayal, and of the sweetest revenge. To understand the weight of that moment, of the collapse that happened in just a few short seconds at the funeral, we have to turn back the clock 7 years. Back to a sun-drenched San Francisco, a city simmering with ambition, where tech giants were born in cramped garages and billion-dollar dreams were written in lines of code on a computer screen. Back then, I was 26, and my world was confined to a small apartment in the Mission District, a world filled with the smell of strong coffee brewed at 3 in the morning, the faint blue glow from 2 large monitors, and the relentless sound of a keyboard, a symphony of creation. I wasn't just writing code, I was architecting a universe. I called it Nexus, a social media application built on a unique algorithm, capable of connecting people based on their deepest emotional and intellectual layers, not just superficial likes. Nexus was my passion, my brainchild, the biggest gamble of my life. I believed it would change the way we interact forever. My life back then had no lavish parties or designer dresses. My joy came from solving a buggy line of code, from the moment an algorithm ran smoothly after sleepless nights. All of my savings from my previous software engineering job were poured into this project, with a portion set aside to care for my father. My dad, a retired history professor, was struggling with a heart condition. Seeing his smile whenever I came to visit and hearing him say he was proud of his genius engineer was my greatest motivation. I naively believed that with enough passion and hard work, all good things would come. And in my world, there was always Chloe, my younger sister. If I was someone who sought satisfaction from within, from quiet works of creation, Chloe was someone who craved validation from the outside. Her world was perfect: Instagram filters, glamorous yacht parties on the San Francisco Bay, and relationships measured by influence and follower counts. She was beautiful, charismatic, and she knew how to use it as a weapon. From childhood, we were two opposite worlds. I had the grades, she had the praise. I had the science fair awards, she had the prom queen's crown. I never saw it as a competition, but perhaps in Chloe's eyes, it always was. She looked at my success and didn't see the sleepless nights. She only saw luck, something God-given that she believed she deserved more. Chloe's greatest burden, perhaps, was being my little sister. Like a planet forced to orbit a sun, she could only reflect a light she could never create herself. That resentment smoldered inside her, just waiting for a breeze to erupt into a living hell. I still remember the times she'd visit my apartment, wrinkling her nose at the mess of coffee mugs and sticky notes plastered on the walls. She would glance at the complex lines of code on my screen and ask a familiar question. Does it make a lot of money? I would try to explain the vision, the technological breakthrough, but I knew she wasn't really listening. She only cared about the end result. Money and fame. And because she was my sister, because of the unconditional love of an older sibling, I ignored all the warning signs. I threw open the door to my world, showed her the entire blueprint of my dream. I had no idea I was handing a fox the map to the henhouse, and that fox wasn't coming alone. She was about to bring along a wolf in prince's clothing. It was then that Ethan entered my life, and the first lines of the tragedy were written. I met Ethan at Innovate West, a premier tech conference held at the Moscone Center. I wasn't there to seek attention, but to attend an in-depth panel on artificial intelligence. He, on the other hand, was the star of the event, the keynote speaker, the young CEO of Momentum Dynamics, a company rising as fast as a kite in the wind. I had heard his name before, read about him in tech magazines. Ethan was known as the Prince of Silicon Valley, a man with $1 million smile, razor-sharp eyes, and a confidence that radiated from his every move. He approached me first, after I asked a rather technical question to the panel. He didn't comment on my appearance, didn't use any cliché pickup lines. He talked about my question. He talked about the algorithmic structure I had mentioned. For the first time, I met a man who didn't just look at me, but truly saw me, saw my mind, saw the passion behind the simple exterior of a female engineer. He spoke my language, the language of code and data structures. And I, foolishly, thought I had found a kindred spirit. Our relationship progressed as fast as a software update. It was a dreamlike period. Dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants in San Francisco, weekend trips to Napa Valley for wine tasting, invitations to the most exclusive product launch parties. For the first time in my life, I felt like the main character in a romance movie. Ethan was generous, attentive, and always made me feel like I was the most special woman in the world. But his manipulation was far more sophisticated. He quickly positioned himself as the #1 mentor, the most ardent fan of Nexus. He spent hours in my small apartment, listening to me passionately present every feature, every algorithm. He would look at my whiteboards, covered in formulas, with an expression of pure admiration. He said I was a genius and that the world needed to know about my product. He offered to help me build a business plan, connect me with important figures, and turn Nexus from a passion project into a billion-dollar company. I, blinded by love and trust, shared everything with him. The password to the source code repository, the market research documents, the 5-year product development roadmap. I showed him my soul, written in numbers and characters. I remember one night, we were sitting on the floor surrounded by sketches, and he took my hand and said, "This isn't your project, Clara, it's us. We are going to change the world together." That sentence erased any lingering doubt I had. He even visited my father, bringing expensive gifts and sitting for hours listening to Dad's history stories. My father, overjoyed that his daughter had found happiness, adored him like a son. And then on an autumn evening, on a hill overlooking the fog-shrouded Golden Gate Bridge, Ethan got down on one knee. The diamond ring sparkled in the sunset, but the thing that made me cry wasn't the stone. It was his words. He said he didn't just want to marry me, but to be my lifelong partner in both life and career. He said the ring was a symbol of their promise, that they would stand on top of the world together with Nexus. I said yes, without a moment's hesitation. I thought it was the happiest chapter of my life. But looking back now, I realize it wasn't a marriage proposal. It was the moment the final trap snapped shut, locking its prey in its own blissful ignorance. The first few months after our engagement were the most beautiful time. We became the golden couple of the San Francisco tech scene. Clara and Ethan, the genius female engineer and the charismatic CEO. Our pictures appeared on tech blogs, mentioned as a symbol of the perfect union between intellect and power. I was immersed in that happiness, in the attention and the accolades. I believed I was living in a modern-day fairy tale. But even in the most beautiful fairy tales, darkness always lurks in the corners. The first crack appeared very subtly. In an interview on a popular podcast, when asked about the future of the industry, Ethan used the exact phrases, the core concepts that I had explained to him about Nexus. He spoke of quantum emotional networking and subconscious synchronization, terms I myself had coined. When I heard that podcast, a strange feeling ran down my spine. A part of me felt proud, telling myself, he really listens and understands me. But another part, a small instinctual voice, whispered that something was wrong. Why did he talk about it as if it were his own idea? I brushed the feeling aside, telling myself I was just being oversensitive. And then, the Trojan horse arrived in the form of my own sister. Chloe, after months of being indifferent to my work, suddenly announced she had been inspired by my and Ethan's story. She said she wanted to change, to learn about the tech world, to become a person with more depth. My heart soared with joy. I thought that finally, my sister and I had found common ground. When Ethan, in a gesture of extreme generosity, offered Chloe an internship at his company, Momentum Dynamics, to help her learn and so you sisters can spend more time together, I was moved to tears. I thanked him profusely, having no idea that I had just personally escorted the enemy into my own headquarters. From then on, things began to change more quickly. Ethan became unusually busy. He spoke of a top-secret project that was consuming all his time, a project that would redefine the future of Momentum Dynamics. The evenings we spent working on Nexus together grew infrequent, replaced by hurried phone calls and curt text messages. An invisible wall began to rise between us. My suspicion became clearer one weekend evening, during dinner at my father's house. I happened to glance at Chloe's laptop screen while she was working, and my heart stopped for a second. On that screen was a piece of code. A piece of code I could recognize in my sleep, because I had written it myself, had optimized it hundreds of times. It was part of the core algorithm in Nexus. When I asked about it, my voice trying to sound calm, Chloe jumped and slammed the laptop shut. She gave a forced laugh and said, "Oh, it's just a little exercise Ethan gave me to get familiar with things. It's so hard." Her explanation sounded plausible, but the panic in her eyes told a different story. The final warning and the most fatal blow came from Ethan's own mouth. When I suggested we should proceed with filing patents for the Nexus algorithms, he stopped me. He hugged me, looking at me with that deceptively sincere gaze, and said, "Let's wait, my love. Let's wait until we've formed our joint company. It'll be much better for tax purposes and intellectual property security if we register everything under the corporate entity. I'm doing this to best protect our brainchild." I, with my lack of legal experience and my absolute trust in him, agreed. He stripped me of my only legal weapon with a sweet lie. The following nights, I couldn't sleep. On one side was the man I loved, the man I was about to marry. On the other was my own sister. And in the middle was a mess of strange coincidences, perfect lies, and a growing sense of unease, like a tumor in my chest. I tried to turn a blind eye, reassuring myself that I was just being paranoid from pre-wedding pressure. But the truth, like a cracked dam, cannot be held back forever. And I had no idea that the flood was about to drown my entire world in front of thousands of people. That flood arrived on a Tuesday at the Momentum Dynamics annual showcase, the biggest yearly event for Ethan's company. He had told me this would be our big night. He gave me an expensive evening gown and a VIP ticket for the front row. He said he wanted me there, right in the front, to witness the moment he announced the glorious future we would build together. I went there, my heart beating with 1 part hope and 3 parts anxiety. I told myself that tonight, all my suspicions would be dispelled, that he would do something to prove his love and respect for me and for Nexus. Oh, how naive I was! The convention center auditorium was packed. The media, investors, top engineers, all of them were there, holding their breath in anticipation. The stage lights were dim, the giant screen behind them glowing with the Momentum Dynamics logo. And then, Ethan walked out. He was like a god on stage, charismatic and powerful. He spoke of innovation, of breaking boundaries, of a coming technological revolution. He was a master showman, and the entire room was mesmerized by his every word. He presented the company's achievements over the past year, the products that had succeeded. And then he paused, smiled mysteriously, and said, "But that's not all. Tonight, we are going to show you the future. We have one more thing." The room fell silent. The screen behind him went black, then lit up again with a colorful promotional video. The soundtrack swelled, epic and inspiring. From the very first second, I was frozen. On the screen was the user interface I had spent months designing. The icons I had drawn pixel by pixel. The menu structure I had debated with myself hundreds of times to get the user experience just right. It was Nexus. But it wasn't called Nexus. On the screen, another name appeared, glittering and proud, Elysian. No, it couldn't be. This had to be a terrible mistake. My heart began to pound, so hard I could hear it in my chest. Blood rushed to my head, my ears were ringing. The video continued, showcasing the core features: the matchmaking algorithm based on psychological analysis, the ability to suggest content based on latent emotions. It was all mine. Every line, every idea. The air was sucked out of my lungs. The world around me blurred, leaving only the cruel light from the giant screen shining in my face, exposing my brainchild in a stranger's form. The video ended. The room exploded in thunderous applause. People rose to their feet. Journalists typed frantically. I sat there, motionless, a stone in a raging river. Ethan raised his hands, basking in the adoration. When the applause subsided, he took the microphone and said, his voice full of emotion, "And to get the foundational idea for Elysian, an application we believe will redefine human connection, I want to thank a very talented partner." For one insane moment, a spark of hope ignited in me. Could it be, was he about to say my name? "My fiancé, Clara," he said, and smiled in my direction. But then he continued, "Introduced me to her sister, Chloe." My entire world shattered. Chloe, with an artist's soul and a unique perspective on human connection, worked with me to build the first bricks of this idea. "Please welcome her to the stage, Chloe." And then, from the wings, my sister emerged, in a white dress so pure she looked like an angel. She smiled, waved to the crowd, and walked to stand beside Ethan. He put his arm around her waist. They raised their hands together to even greater applause. Camera flashes went off incessantly. They were the new golden couple. They were the innovators. They were the future. And I sat there, in the front row, in the shadows right at the foot of the stage. Invisible. Forgotten. My heart wasn't just broken. It had been crushed into a million useless pieces of source code. Right there, in front of thousands of people, I lost everything. I don't know how I managed to stand up. Around me, the applause still echoed, but to me, it sounded like a mocking, endless jeer. Everyone was on their feet, their faces ecstatic, their eyes glued to the stage where the two people who had destroyed me were smiling and waving. I felt the air in my lungs thicken, making it impossible to breathe. I had to get out of there. Moving through the crowd was like wading through a river of mud. Every step was heavy. Strangers' faces passed by me. They were laughing, talking about Elysian, about the miracle they had just witnessed. They didn't know they were cheering for a lie, that they were walking past a soul that had just been murdered on the spot. I didn't look at anyone. I just stared at the floor, trying to make my way to the exit, toward the small bit of air I desperately needed. But I didn't go outside. Some invisible force guided me toward the wings, to the backstage area for staff and performers, to where I knew they would be. I needed to hear it. I needed to understand. No matter how cruel the truth was, I needed it to be said from their own mouths. I found them in a small waiting room, accepting congratulations from a few board members. Chloe was beaming, a glass of champagne in her hand. Ethan looked like a conquering king. When they saw me, the smiles vanished. Ethan gestured for the others to leave, and then there were just the three of us. The room suddenly fell into a suffocating silence. Finally, I managed to speak, my voice hoarse and alien, as if it weren't my own. Why? Just one word, but it held all my pain, all my disbelief. Ethan sighed, unbuttoning his suit jacket, his demeanor shifting from that of a CEO to a cold-blooded lawyer. This is business? Clara, you have to be realistic. Your idea was brilliant, a true raw gem. But it needed a launchpad, a marketing strategy, and ecosystem to grow. We didn't steal it, we elevated it. We gave it a chance to shine, a chance you could never have achieved alone. The cold blade of his logic plunged deep into my heart. He spoke of my dream as if it were just a commodity, an asset to be optimized. I turned to Chloe, the sister I had loved, hoping to find even a flicker of remorse in her eyes. And you, Chloe? Why? Chloe set her champagne flute on the table. She looked straight at me, without a trace of fear, only years of accumulated defiance and resentment. Why? Because I'm tired. I'm tired of always standing in your shadow. Clara the genius, Clara the smart one. You always had everything so easily without even trying. This time, it's my turn. I deserve this. Ethan saw the potential in me, something you never did. In that instant, I understood everything. The facade had crumbled. Before me stood not the man I loved or the sister I once knew. They were two strangers, two accomplices connected by ambition and cruelty. Ethan stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening tone. I hope you're smart enough not to make a scene about this, Clara. You have no proof. But I have a team of lawyers who can bury you in defamation lawsuits. Don't test me. My trembling hand rose, pulling the engagement ring from my finger. The diamond I had once admired with so much hope now seemed cold and soulless. I looked Ethan straight in the eye and let it go. The ring hit the floor with a sharp, dry clack in the silent room. It was the sound of a broken promise, the sound of a life ending. I turned and walked away without another word. I left them there with their filthy victory. I walked out of the building through the glittering streets of San Francisco. The city of dreams now felt like nothing more than a graveyard to me. My dream had been buried right there, and I knew I had to run. Run from this city, from these people, and from the shadow of the person I once was. The following days passed like a recurring nightmare. I didn't leave my apartment, a place that was once a sanctuary of creativity, but had now become a tomb. The giant whiteboard that took up an entire wall, where I had once mapped out the entire architecture of Nexus, now mocked me like a giant tombstone, taunting me with my own ideas. I stood before it for hours, before grabbing an eraser and, with a cruel determination, I wiped it all away. Every formula, every diagram, every note, all vanished in smeared streaks of ink, just like my future. My phone rang constantly. Friends, former colleagues, and my father. I didn't answer a single call. What could I tell them? That the man I had praised endlessly, the man I was about to marry, had conspired with my own sister to destroy me? The shame and humiliation were more painful than the betrayal itself. So I chose silence. I lived in a cocoon of muteness and pain, with only 4 walls for company. The outside world was not as silent as I was. News about Elysian was everywhere. It was hailed as a revolution. Major tech publications ran photos of Ethan and Chloe, calling them the new power couple of Silicon Valley. I saw my sister smile in articles, giving interviews about her inspiration. Every image, every article, was like 1,000 needles stabbing into my bleeding wound. Finally, I mustered the courage to call my father back. I had to, before he worried himself sick. I heard the relief in his voice when I answered. He asked about the product launch, about Ethan, and I lied. I said everything was wonderful, that I was just a little tired from being so busy. I heard the words come out of my mouth and felt disgusted with myself. The lie was a heavy burden, but I couldn't let my father, with his already weak heart, endure this shock. The call ended, and I felt more alone than ever. Just when I thought I couldn't sink any lower, the final blow arrived. It wasn't a call or a text. It was an email, sent from a prestigious law firm representing Momentum Dynamics. Its language was cold, impersonal, and cruel. The email informed me that, per my verbal agreement with CEO Ethan, I was required to hand over all documents, notes, and code segments related to the initial ideation phase of the Elysian project. They had framed my entire passion, my entire life's work, in 2 words: initial ideation. They didn't just steal my dream, they were trying to erase my existence from its history. That email was the last straw. The paralysis of my pain suddenly vanished, replaced by a single feeling, the urge to run. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't stay in San Francisco, where every street corner held a memory, where I could run into them at any moment. I couldn't fight Ethan's army of lawyers. I had already lost. That night, I opened my laptop. I searched for up-and-coming tech cities in the US. Austin, Texas. A name appeared. I had once seen a documentary about it, about its vibrant music scene, its laid-back atmosphere, less competitive than Silicon Valley. A warm place, a strange place, a place where no one knew who I was. Without a second thought, I booked a one-way plane ticket. In the hours that followed, I acted like a machine. I posted all my furniture for sale online at ridiculously low prices. I packed what was left into 2 boxes and sent them to a storage unit. I kept only a single suitcase containing a few changes of clothes and my old laptop. As dawn broke over the San Francisco Bay, my apartment was empty. It was back to the exact state it was in when I first moved in, empty and soulless. The only difference was, this time, the person living in it was just as empty and soulless. I had no plan, no goal, no glimmer of hope. I only knew one thing. I had to leave, and that was the first step in my own self-imposed exile. The flight from San Francisco to Austin was just over 3 hours, but for me, it felt like a migration across centuries. I sat in the window seat, watching the city where I had invested all of my youth and ambition slowly shrink below. The Golden Gate Bridge appeared and disappeared in the fog. The San Francisco Bay glittered under the sun, and the skyscrapers where I had once dreamed of building my own empire now looked like harmless little toothpicks. As the plane broke through the clouds, completely obscuring the ground, I felt a final, invisible cord snap. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anything. Just a vast emptiness, a terrifying void inside my chest that was worse than pain. When the plane landed, the first gust of air that hit my face wasn't the familiar cool sea breeze, but the hot, dry air of Texas. It was a physical shock, a clear reminder that I was somewhere else entirely. Everything was different. The accents, the cowboy hats, the overwhelming sense of open space. I had rented a small studio apartment in a nondescript old apartment complex in South Austin. It had nothing in it but 4 pale beige walls and a bed. But for me, at that moment, anonymity was a blessing. Here, no one knew Clara, the genius engineer. No one knew about Nexus, Elysian, Ethan, or Chloe. I was just another strange face in the city. But anonymity doesn't pay the bills. My meager savings dwindled quickly. The nightmare of betrayal was gradually replaced by a more practical fear. How to survive. I, who was once pursued by top tech companies, now had to look for a job like anyone else. I didn't apply to any tech companies. The thought of sitting in front of a screen and writing code again made me nauseous. It was like forcing a colorblind painter to paint. So I did the only thing I could. I got a job as a barista at a small coffee shop called The Daily Grind, tucked away on a quiet street. The work was simple, mechanical, and required no thought. "Good morning, what can I get for you?" "Here's your black coffee. Have a good day." I repeated those phrases hundreds of times a day like a robot. My smile was just a reflex of my facial muscles. I kept my distance from everyone, polite but cold. My coworkers probably thought I was odd, but they didn't ask many questions. I became a part of the shop's space, a shadow moving quietly behind the bar. This coffee shop was where I first observed life in Austin. It was warm, rustic, with brick walls and wooden tables. The customers were mostly students, freelancers, and artists. There were no conversations about million-dollar funding rounds or corporate acquisitions. Instead, there were discussions about music, an art exhibition, or a new architectural project. And among the regular customers, there was a man. He came in around 8 o'clock every morning, never a minute late. He always ordered a black coffee, no sugar, no milk. He always sat at the last table in the corner by the window and took out a leather-bound notebook. He didn't use a laptop or a phone. He just sat there, quietly sketching in his notebook with a pencil. He had a calm demeanor, an intense focus that seemed to make the space around him stand still. He never tried to make small talk with me, beyond a polite greeting. He was just a familiar presence, an unchanging constant in my chaotic life. His silence, somehow, was the most comforting thing to me. I didn't know his name. I didn't know what he did. I only knew that every morning when I saw him walk in, my world felt a little less precarious. I had no idea that this quiet man and his notebook were the first stone, the foundation upon which I would rebuild my entire life from the ashes. For weeks, the routine didn't change. I made coffee, and he sketched. We existed in the same space, but in two parallel worlds, intersecting only through a black coffee and a quiet thank you. That stability, strangely enough, became my lifeline. In an ocean of uncertainty, his routine was the only island I could see each morning. And then one day, that routine was broken. The shop was busier than usual that day. He took his coffee, gave me his usual nod, but perhaps in his haste, he left without his notebook on the table. It wasn't until I was cleaning up that I discovered it. The dark brown leather-bound notebook, so familiar I could recognize it from a distance. A powerful urge rose within me. For the first time in months, curiosity, a very human emotion I thought I had lost, returned. I wanted to open it, to know the secret behind his silent hours. But I didn't. I knew all too well what it felt like to have my private space violated. Instead, I carefully placed the notebook in a drawer behind the counter, feeling a strange responsibility to protect this stranger's secrets. The next morning, he came in earlier than usual. I could see the distinct worry on his face, a crack in his usual calm composure. He walked straight to the counter, not even ordering coffee. "Excuse me, did I happen to leave a notebook here yesterday?" I nodded, took it out of the drawer, and handed it to him. "I kept it for you." He took the notebook back, and I could see his entire body relax as if a huge weight had been lifted. He let out a sigh of relief. "Thank you. Thank you so much. I really don't know what I would have done if I'd lost it." He looked at me, and for the first time our eyes truly met, no longer as a barista and a customer. "I see you sketch in it every day." I blurted out, surprised at my own initiative. "It must be very important." He smiled softly, a genuine and warm smile. "It's my entire job." Perhaps out of gratitude or because of something in my eyes, he did something unexpected. He opened the notebook, turned to a page that wasn't too personal, and angled it toward me. On that page were not artistic pictures or random doodles. They were blueprints, precise lines, detailed numbers, cross-sections of a building with a complex structure, spiral staircases, windows calculated to catch the light perfectly. They were the drawings of an architect, and suddenly, something inside me reawakened. I, a person who built worlds with the language of code, immediately recognized his language. "It's like writing code," I said, my voice full of surprise. "Everything has to have order, logic, a solid foundation. One wrong detail can make the whole system collapse." His eyes lit up. He nodded eagerly. "Exactly. That's exactly it. People only see the beauty on the outside, but they don't see the architecture within, the thing that actually holds it all together." For the first time in months, I had a real conversation. A conversation that went beyond social pleasantries. We didn't talk about the weather or make small talk. We talked about foundations, about structure, about the beauty of well-built systems. His name was Leo, and I, for the first time since arriving in Austin, said my real name. Clara. From that day on, our routine changed. He still came in at 8, still ordered a black coffee, but now he would linger at the counter for a few minutes to talk to me. He would tell me about the challenges of designing a new footbridge, or about a new material he was researching. And I, though still cautious, began to share a little about the logic of software systems, without, of course, ever mentioning my past. Leo never asked about my past. He never asked why someone who could speak so profoundly about system architecture was working in a coffee shop. He simply accepted me as I was in the present, with patience and respect. His silence was no longer the silence of a stranger, but had become the silence of a friend, a safe space where I could, little by little, allow myself to heal. Our friendship blossomed over those brief morning coffee conversations. Months passed. The Austin winter wasn't too cold, but it was enough for me to feel the warmth of the coffee shop, of the talks about design, and of Leo's quiet presence. He had become a familiar part of my life, a bright spot in my repetitive days. I had started to get used to smiling naturally when I saw him, a smile that didn't have to be forced. Then one day, he broke the routine. After taking his coffee, he didn't turn to leave right away. He hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Clara, there's an exhibit at the Art Museum this weekend on the future of architecture. I thought you might like it. Would you like to go with me?" My heart skipped a beat. An invitation. A simple, no-pressure invitation. But it broke through the safe wall I had carefully built around myself. A part of me, the part that craved a normal life, wanted to scream yes. But the other part, the one still covered in scars, recoiled in fear. To go out. With a man. Not as a barista, but as Clara. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. But looking into Leo's patient, unexpectant eyes, I took a deep breath and nodded. It was the bravest step I had taken in almost a year. The exhibit was wonderful. For the first time in a very long time, I felt alive again. I was no longer the coffee girl with the hollow smile. I was Clara, the person who could passionately debate the feasibility of a suspension bridge made of composite materials. The person who could point out the similarities between the architecture of a building and the architecture of an operating system. Leo was a fantastic conversationalist. He listened, countered, and added to my ideas. I felt a flicker of my old self, the intelligent, passionate, and enthusiastic woman, returning. We were standing in front of a giant model of a smart city, with buildings connected by bridges of light. Leo, in his excitement, turned to me and said, "This is incredible. Imagine if we could build something like this." The word "we." It was like a switch had been flipped. The memory came flooding back without warning. I saw myself in my San Francisco apartment. I heard Ethan's voice. "This isn't your project, Clara. It's us. We are going to change the world together." The exhibition hall suddenly tilted. The intricate architectural models around me seemed to melt. My throat closed up. I couldn't breathe. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. I could hear Leo calling my name, but his voice sounded like it was coming from a great distance. Panic washed over me, powerful and uncontrollable. I just wanted to run, to shrink, to disappear. But Leo didn't leave me alone. He didn't panic, didn't get flustered, didn't get annoyed. He simply acted. He gently placed a hand on my back, not too intimate but enough for me to feel supported, and guided me out of the exhibit hall to a quiet bench in the courtyard outside. He sat next to me, but at a respectful distance. He didn't ask, "Are you okay?" He just said calmly, "It's all right, take your time. Focus on my breathing, Clara, in and out." He sat there with me for maybe 20 minutes until my trembling subsided and I could breathe normally again. He didn't say anything else. He just handed me a bottle of water, then quietly drove me home. Not one question, not one judgmental look. That night, I was consumed by guilt and shame. I had ruined a wonderful afternoon. I had acted like a crazy person. But Leo's calm and respect gave me a courage I didn't think I had. I called him. When he picked up, I didn't give him a chance to speak. I told him everything, the whole story. About Ethan, about Chloe, about Nexus, about the public betrayal, about my escape to Austin. The words poured out of me like a broken dam, a flood of pain, anger, and humiliation that I had suppressed for so long. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end. Then Leo spoke, his voice low and full of understanding. "Thank you for trusting me enough to tell me, Clara." He paused, then continued, "I can't say I know exactly what you've been through, but I do understand the feeling of betrayal. A few years ago, my marriage ended when my wife left with my own business partner. They took half the company I had built from scratch." I was stunned. He went on, his voice now holding not just understanding, but the wisdom of someone who had been through the storm. "The scar of betrayal never truly disappears, Clara. It just teaches us to build stronger walls and smarter doors." In that moment, I no longer felt alone. For the first time, I had found someone who didn't just see my broken pieces, but who showed me his own scars in return. Our bond was no longer built on blueprints or lines of code. It was built on a much stronger foundation, the shared empathy of two once broken souls on a journey to heal. That fateful phone call changed everything. It wasn't a magic wand that erased all the scars, but it laid a solid foundation for true healing. From that night on, my relationship with Leo entered a new chapter. We were no longer the barista and the regular customer. We were more than just two friends with a shared empathy. We became partners. Our dates were not loud or flashy, Sometimes they were just long walks around Ladybird Lake, silently watching the kayakers glide across the water. Some say were evenings spent cooking together in Leo's small apartment, the space filled with the smell of sautéed garlic and cheerful laughter. He never tried to fix me. He didn't push me to forget the past or to get over it quickly. He was simply there, completely present. He listened when I needed to talk and offered a safe silence when I wanted to say nothing at all. Leo wasn't the firefighter rushing in to douse the flames of my past. He was the one patiently cultivating a new garden on the scorched earth. It was in that peace that a miracle happened. One afternoon, while watching Leo work on a complex design for a community library, I saw him struggling to manage hundreds of different blueprints and reference documents. An idea sparked in my mind. That night, for the first time in over a year, I voluntarily opened my laptop and started to write code. My fingers on the keyboard were hesitant at first, timid, as if afraid of awakening a sleeping monster. But then the flow returned. The logic, the structure, the wonderful feeling of building something from nothing. It was like a long dormant instinct, now slowly reawakening. I wasn't building a billion-dollar social network. I was just building a small tool, a simple application to help Leo visually organize his architectural projects. I did it not for money, not for fame. I did it because I wanted to, for the pure joy of creation, and because I wanted to help the man I loved. When I showed Leo my creation, he was completely amazed. He didn't talk about its potential for commercialization. He just said, "Clara, you're incredible. Thank you." He used it every day, and his satisfied smile when the app saved him hours of work was my greatest reward. I had rediscovered my passion, not in the stressful boardrooms of Silicon Valley, but in the safe and loving space Leo had created for me. Time passed. 2 years after I first set foot in Austin, I had quit my job at the coffee shop and started working as a freelance software developer, taking on small projects that I loved. We had rented a small house together with a lovely garden. One spring evening, as we were sitting on our back porch, watching the flowers we had planted ourselves, Leo turned to me. He didn't get down on one knee. There was no grand performance. He just took my hand, looked deep into my eyes, and said, "Clara, my life before I met you was like a beautiful blueprint with no one to build it with. You came and turned it into a real home. You are the foundation, the structure, the light in that home. I want to keep building this life with you, every day. Will you marry me?" Tears started to fall, but they were tears of happiness, of complete peace. The ring he gave me was not a giant diamond. It was a deep sea blue sapphire set in an intricate platinum band that looked like a miniature piece of architecture. It was unique, delicate, and full of meaning, just like our love. I said yes without a moment's hesitation. It was not the yes of a naive young girl dreaming of a fairy tale. It was the yes of a woman who had walked through the storm, who understood what a solid foundation was, and who had found her life's architect. Our wedding took place on a sunny afternoon in Austin, in our backyard garden, with just a few close friends and my father, who flew in from San Francisco. Dad took my hand, gave it to Leo, and said with a voice trembling with emotion, "I've never seen you this happy and at peace, Clara." And it was true. My life with Leo wasn't a series of thrilling highs, but a gentle symphony of respect, understanding, and small, everyday joys. We bought a house with many windows where the light always flooded in. He designed, and I wrote the software to manage our smart home. Together, we built a real life, a true home, founded on love and trust. I still kept in touch with my father through weekly video calls. We talked about everything, except for one taboo topic, Chloe and Ethan. I knew my father still saw them, and occasionally he would inadvertently mention their lavish trips to Europe, or the large mansion they had bought in Pacific Heights. I didn't feel jealous. I just felt a distant pity. They were living in a meticulously staged play, while I was living an authentic life. Everything continued on peacefully until one evening at a charity fundraiser in Austin. Leo was one of the main sponsors, and we were talking with a group of other investors. One man, after learning I had once worked in Silicon Valley, happened to mention the name I hadn't heard in years. "The market there is so volatile these days," he said. "Even once promising companies like Ethan Reynolds' Momentum Dynamics are struggling. Drowning in debt, no new product breakthroughs. I hear Valor Equity Partners is considering a buyout for pennies on the dollar. Valor. The name hit me like a thunderbolt. That was the name of the investment fund Leo had co-founded. I turned to look at Leo, trying to keep my face from showing my shock. He just gave a slight nod, a signal that we would talk later. On the way home, the silence in the car was heavy. Finally, I spoke. You know, Ethan, you know his company is in trouble? Leo pulled the car into the garage, turned off the engine, and then turned to face me. He didn't avoid my gaze. I knew, Clara. I knew from the very beginning. I was stunned. He continued, his voice gentle. The first day you told me your name at the coffee shop, I knew. Your story, at least the part that was made public in the press, isn't a secret in the tech world. I knew you had been engaged to Ethan Reynolds. Then why didn't you say anything? I asked, my voice not angry but deeply confused. Because I wanted you to know me as Leo, he answered, and it was the most sincere answer I had ever heard. I wanted you to know me, the architect who loves stable structures, not the investor connected to your past. I wanted you to heal on your own, to get back on your feet without any interference or influence from that story. Our relationship had to be built on a completely clean foundation. Valor considering an acquisition of Momentum Dynamics is a pure business decision by my partners, based on data about their poor management. I know about it, but I'm not the one making the final call. I looked into his eyes, and I believed him. Completely. After everything we had been through, I knew the man Leo was. I didn't feel deceived. I just felt the irony of fate, a strange circle the universe was drawing. Just as we were sitting in the silence of the car, processing this incredible information, my phone rang. The screen displayed the number for San Francisco General Hospital. My heart clenched. An icy sense of foreboding ran down my spine. I answered, my hand trembling. The voice on the other end was professional and unfamiliar. Excuse me. Are you Clara Foster, daughter of Mr. David Chen? Your father, he's had a massive heart attack. We're doing everything we can. You should get here immediately. The bubble of peace I had spent 5 years painstakingly building shattered in an instant. The past I had run away from was now calling me back, not as a memory, but as a harsh family tragedy. The flight back to San Francisco was no longer an option. It was an inevitability. The bubble of peace shattered with a shrill beep from the phone. Clara's world, carefully rebuilt on a foundation of love and trust, lurched violently. The words San Francisco General Hospital on the screen weren't just text. They were a time portal ripped open, dragging her back to the very place she'd fled. Clara? Leo's voice pulled her from her daze. He'd seen her face go pale, her eyes wide with panic. It's my dad, she whispered, her voice lost. He had a heart attack. No more words were needed. Leo sprang into action. He didn't ask pointless questions or offer empty platitudes. He became exactly what she needed. A rock. I'm booking tickets now, he said, already pulling out his phone. Earliest flight. I'm coming with you. The red-eye flight from Austin to San Francisco was the quietest of Clara's life. She sat by the window, staring at the endless city lights below, but her mind was elsewhere. She was returning. Not as a failure, a refugee escaping her past, but as the wife of a powerful investor, a woman who'd reclaimed herself. Yet, cruelly, she was also returning as a frightened daughter. Strength and vulnerability waged a fierce battle within her. The hospital at midnight held a chilling silence, broken only by the steady beeps of machines and the clack of a nurse's heels in the empty hall. The ICU waiting room's cold air seeped into her bones. Then she saw them. In a corner sat Chloe. Her sister looked haggard, expensive makeup failing to hide the dark circles and exhaustion. Beside her, a hand resting protectively on her shoulder, was Ethan. He looked the same, polished in a perfectly tailored suit, but tension tightened his jaw. When they spotted Clara and Leo entering, the room seemed to lose all air. Chloe shot to her feet, her eyes defensive, tinged with accusation. Where have you been? Her voice trembled with anger. Dad's been calling you for a week. You didn't even answer. Before Clara could respond, Ethan stepped forward, placing himself between the sisters. Chloe, not now, he said, his tone that of a mature caretaker. He turned to Clara, a weary but condescending smile on his lips. Clara, I'm glad you're here. Your father's critical. The doctors say, I'm not talking to you, Clara cut him off, her voice ice cold. Her eyes locked on Chloe. "How's Dad?" Their silent standoff was interrupted by a doctor stepping out. "Miss Foster? Miss Croft?" he asked, glancing at both. "Your father's stabilized, but he's still very weak. It was a severe heart attack, likely triggered by prolonged stress." "Stress?" Clara echoed. At that moment, a nurse approached Chloe. "Ma'am, we need you to cover part of the surgical and ICU costs up front." Clara saw Chloe fumble for her credit card, flustered. But Ethan stopped her. "I've got it," he said gallantly, handing the nurse his American Express black card. He glanced at Clara, his look loaded with meaning, a quiet flex of power. He was paying. He was in control. He was the one caring for the family she'd left behind. Clara said nothing. She walked to the ICU's glass door, gazing at her father, motionless amid a tangle of wires and machines. A chilling question formed in her mind. Prolonged stress? Her father was retired. His life was calm. So where had that stress come from? Hours later, her father woke. He could only speak in a faint rasp. When they were alone, he gripped her hand, his aged eyes brimming with tears. "Clara, my girl, I'm so sorry." "What do you mean you're sorry for, Dad?" Clara asked, her heart tightening. I wasn't strong enough," he gasped. 5 years ago, my medical bills, they were huge. I didn't want to burden you. You were so busy with Nexus. Ethan, he offered to help. He lent me a lot of money, a big sum." Clara's world stopped, but it wasn't a loan, sweetheart. Her father continued, tears falling. "It was leverage. He used it to pressure me, said he'd expose me if I didn't get Chloe to help him, that a professor's daughter would be humiliated for leaving me drowning in debt. Chloe, she just wanted to protect us. She made a terrible mistake, but she was trying to save me." The final, darkest puzzle piece clicked into place. Chloe's betrayal wasn't just jealousy. It was more complex, more twisted. It was born of love, fear, and Ethan's masterful manipulation. He hadn't just stolen her company. He'd poisoned her family from within. Clara left the room, her mind sharper than ever. Her anger toward Chloe had morphed into a painful empathy. But for Ethan, it had hardened into something colder, more resolute. This wasn't about business revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming justice for her family. She found Chloe alone at the end of the hall, Ethan off somewhere on a call. Clara sat beside her sister. Silence hung heavy. "You could have told me," Clara said gently. Chloe flinched, looking up, her eyes red. "Told you what? That Dad was going bankrupt from medical bills? That I had to choose between watching him lose everything or doing what Ethan wanted? You'd never understand." "I would have," Clara replied, her voice steady. "I would have found a way. We could have found a way together, but you chose to trust him over me." Chloe broke down, her sobs raw and shattered. "I'm sorry, Clara. I'm so sorry." Just then, Ethan returned, his face annoyed. "What's going on here?" He shot Clara a warning look. "Don't stress her out more." Clara stood, facing him head-on. Leo, sensing the moment, positioned himself behind her, a silent but powerful presence. "It's over, Ethan," Clara said. "Your charade ends now. I know about your loan to my father. I know everything." Ethan's face drained of color. For the first time, Clara saw his usual confidence falter. "And I think," she continued, her voice like ice, "the partners at Valor Ventures would find it very interesting to learn that the CEO of the company they're acquiring uses such unethical fundraising and partner persuasion tactics. Maybe you should review your contract terms." The real revenge wasn't a company's collapse. It was stripping a manipulator of his final weapon, his secrets. Clara didn't need to do more. She'd spoken the truth, and that truth would carry out the rest of the sentence. She turned away from Ethan, took her sister's hand, and together they walked toward their father's room. The road ahead was long and fraught, forgiveness not an overnight feat. But for the first time in 7 years, they walked the same path together. As the hospital room door closed behind Ethan, the tension didn't vanish. It transformed. Hostility gave way to a heavy, aching silence. Clara, Chloe, and their father on the hospital bed formed the 3 points of a broken triangle. For the first time in years, they were in the same room without Ethan's manipulative presence, forced to face the raw truth of what they'd done, and hadn't done, for each other. Leo didn't intrude. He placed a hand on Clara's shoulder, a quiet pillar of strength, then nodded and stepped out, leaving space for their family. He knew some battles he couldn't fight for her, some wounds only those within could heal. The first conversation wasn't a dialogue. It was a confession. "Chloe, stripped of arrogance or defensiveness, sat in the chair by the bed and poured it all out. She spoke of her fear as their father's medical bills piled up. She described how Ethan approached her, not as a suitor, but a savior, promising to fix the family's financial woes in exchange for just a little information and help from the inside. She admitted her jealousy, the inferiority of living in the shadow of her genius sister, a feeling Ethan expertly deepened and exploited. She cried, not to beg forgiveness, but to shed the toxic weight she'd carried for 7 years. Clara sat and listened. Her anger had faded, leaving only a profound sadness. "You didn't just take Nexus, Chloe," Clara said. Her voice no longer sharp, only weary. "You took my trust in the one thing I thought I had left. You took our family." From the bed, their father's frail voice broke through. "It's not just her fault," he said, and both daughters turned to him. "The biggest fault is my cowardice. I was too proud to tell my daughters I was struggling. I let an outsider step in and prey on both your fears. Forgive this old father." In that sterile hospital room, the truth was finally spoken. No more lies, no more secrets. Just 3 wounded people owning their roles in the family's tragedy. It wasn't a moment of reconciliation, but of honesty. And that was the first, hardest step. The weeks that followed were a slow process of recovery, physical and emotional. Their father's health stabilized. Clara and Leo arranged for him to transfer to a top rehabilitation center. Meanwhile, news from the business world trickled in. As predicted, Valor Ventures, armed with new information about Ethan's tactics, restructured the deal. Ethan was forced out of the company he built on deceit, leaving with minimal compensation and a reputation utterly ruined in investment circles. Momentum Dynamics and its product Elysian were now under Valor's control. One day, Leo sat with Clara. "The board wants to kill Elysian. Too much scandal," he said. "But I think there's another option." That's when Clara made a decision that would shape their future. She pitched a plan to Valor's board. She wouldn't return to lead. Instead, she proposed heading a small team to restructure Elysian, restoring it to Nexus's original vision, an authentic, non-profit, secure platform connecting people. And in that plan, she included a role, the lowest level internship on the project team, for Chloe. "You wanted to build it," Clara told Chloe later. "So do it right. But this time, you start from the bottom. No shortcuts, no privileges. You have to prove you're worthy." For Chloe, it wasn't punishment. It was a path, a chance to atone not with words, but actions. She accepted without hesitation. 2 years later, a sunny afternoon in Austin. In a modern auditorium, a launch event was underway. On stage, Clara and Leo stood side by side. Their father, healthy and content, sat in the front row. In another corner, a more mature, humble Chloe coordinated the event as project manager. They weren't launching a tech product. They were unveiling a new organization, the Chen Foster Foundation, named for both their parents. Clara stepped to the podium, gazing at the audience. 7 years ago, she began, her voice strong and resonant. "I lost everything to a stolen idea and a family fractured by secrets. Today, we stand here to ensure no one faces that alone." She explained the Chen Foster Foundation's dual mission. First, to provide legal support, counseling, and intellectual property protection for young innovators, so their ideas are never stolen. Second, to establish an emergency fund for families facing medical burdens, helping them overcome hardship without sacrificing dignity or falling prey to predators. She ended her speech with unscripted words. "People say the sweetest revenge is success, but I've learned that's not quite true. Real revenge, real victory, isn't watching your enemy fall. It's standing on the ashes of betrayal, picking up the pieces, and with those you love, building something new, better, and stronger. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove we were right to choose healing, integrity, and compassion." As she finished, the audience rose in applause. But Clara didn't look at them. She looked to her family. Leo smiled at her, eyes full of pride. Her father nodded, his face glowing with joy. And Chloe, from afar, met her gaze and smiled. A genuine smile, free of jealousy, filled with respect and gratitude. The final circle had closed. Not with an end, but with a bold new beginning. 6 months after the emotional launch of the Chen Foster Foundation, the organization had become a beacon of hope in the tech world. Their Austin office wasn't like a law firm or venture fund. It was warm, open, with collaborative workspaces and walls plastered with ideas. Their mission was clear: protect creative minds. Clara had found her true calling. She no longer coded to build empires. She used her expertise to forge shields, guarding young inventors from the wolves she knew too well. Leo, with his experience and network, provided legal and strategic support. Their father, David, fully recovered, became a revered mentor for the foundation, often counseling and inspiring young innovators. Chloe, Clara's sister, kept her promise. She started at the bottom at the restructured Nexus, working diligently, humbly, never complaining. The sisters' relationship still had quiet moments, invisible scars, but it was healing through respect and earnest effort. Everything seemed on track. Until one day, a file landed Clara's desk. It was the case of Maya, a brilliant 22-year-old coder. She developed an AI algorithm predicting disease outbreaks by analyzing social media and public health data, a technology that could save millions. And in a painfully familiar script, her work was stolen. The thief was her mentor, a respected university professor who'd quietly patented it under his name and was selling it to a major corporation. Reading the file, Clara felt the air drain from the room. Every detail. The young woman's naive trust, the mentor's cunning manipulation, the sweet lies about building it together for the greater good mirrored Clara's own 7 years of hell. That evening, she showed Leo the file. He read it silently, then looked up, eyes full of concern. "Are you sure you want to relive this, Clara? Your wounds are just starting to heal." "It's because they're healing," Clara replied, her voice firm, "that I understand this pain better than anyone. If our foundation doesn't help this girl, what's the point of its existence?" Leo nodded, knowing she was right, but then Clara made an even tougher call. "And I want Chloe on this case." Leo stared stunned. "Chloe? You think that's wise? This could be too much for her? It's not punishment. It's a test," Clara explained. "A test for her and for me. I need someone on the team who doesn't just understand tech, but the psychology of betrayal. I need someone who knows how a thief thinks." The talk with Chloe happened the next day. When Clara placed Maya's file on the table, she saw Chloe's face pale, memories flooding back. Chloe read it, her hands trembling slightly. "Why me?" Chloe asked, her voice nearly a whisper, avoiding Clara's eyes. "Because," Clara said bluntly, "you know these people. You know how they manipulate, how they justify themselves. I can spot flaws in code, but you can spot flaws in their lies. I need you." Chloe was silent for a long moment. It was a burden, but also an opportunity, a chance to turn the most shameful experience of her life into a weapon to protect others. "I'll do it," she finally said, her voice carrying newfound resolve. And so, for the first time in nearly a decade, the sisters worked together on a project. The start was awkward, but slowly they found a rhythm. Clara analyzed digital evidence, tracing when the professor accessed Maya's code repository. Chloe pored over hundreds of their email exchanges. "Here," Chloe said one evening, pointing to a chain of emails. "Look at how he talks, Clara. He uses we and our project, but he's always the one making final decisions. He overpraises Maya, making her feel validated, while planting the idea that her work would go nowhere without his prestige and experience." I know this type. They leave no technical trace, but they always leave tracks in how they manipulate people around them. Chloe dissected the professor's tactics with chilling precision, because they were the same ones Ethan had used on both sisters. The final confrontation unfolded in a law firm's conference room. The professor, dignified and scholarly, sat across from them, flanked by an expensive legal team. Clara opened, presenting irrefutable digital evidence, but the professor remained calm, dismissing it as standard collaboration. That's when Chloe spoke. She didn't talk tech. She talked people. She told a story, not Maya's, but her own. She described the thrill of a powerful mentor's attention, blind trust, sweet promises, and how subtle manipulation can turn a good person into a complicit one. She didn't accuse. She described. The professor grew visibly unsettled. His facade began to crack. Chloe locked eyes with him. "You told Maya she was a genius, but also made her believe she couldn't succeed alone, didn't you? You promised a shared future while quietly filing papers to claim it as yours. Because that's how people like you, and like I once was, operate." Chloe's indirect but weighty confession was the decisive blow. The professor and his lawyers knew they were beaten. They'd prepared for an intellectual property lawsuit, not an ethical and psychological exposure. After the meeting, with Maya's patent restored, the sisters stood silently outside the building. "Thank you, Chloe," Clara said. "I just did what's right," Chloe replied, but her voice held relief. Maybe this is how Nexus finally saves someone." Clara gave a small smile. The scar between them remained, but for the first time, it no longer throbbed. It had become a reminder, not just of betrayal, but of resilience, redemption, and the strength found when two lost souls choose to rebuild a stronger foundation together. Maya's lawsuit victory sent shockwaves. The Chen Foster Foundation was no longer a promising startup. It had become a force, a symbol of integrity in a Silicon Valley often criticized for ethical scandals. Their reputation drew talent, donors, and attention they hadn't anticipated. Life settled into a new rhythm, busy but meaningful. Clara, with Leo's support, emerged as a respected leader. Chloe, after her success in the lawsuit, found her place. She was no longer her sister's shadow or a penitent. She'd become a sharp strategist, adept at dissecting the darker side of business relationships, a vital skill for the Foundation's mission. The sisters' bond, now rooted in mutual respect and complementarity, was stronger than ever. Just when they felt they were truly making a difference, an offer arrived, one that could change everything. The offer came from Silas Vance, a legendary name in tech. Unlike Ethan, Silas wasn't a flashy CEO or emotional manipulator. He was a reclusive inventor, a self-made billionaire with a mind said to be decades ahead of its time. He requested a private meeting with the Foundation's leaders, Clara, Leo, and Chloe. They met in a minimalist conference room at the Foundation's office. Silas Vance, dressed simply, exuded no dominance. He spoke slowly, expressing deep admiration for their work. "You've done what no one else has," Silas said. "You've brought a moral compass back to tech. That's why I'm here. I've created something that could change the world, but it scares me. I need your help to guide it." He unveiled his project, called Prometheus. It was an AI system for prediction, not of weather or stocks, but of human criminal behavior. By analyzing billions of anonymized data points, financial transactions, social media activity, movement history, public safety reports, Prometheus could identify individuals at high risk of violent or organized crime with, Silas claimed, 99.7% accuracy. "Imagine," Silas said, his eyes alight with near fanatical passion. "We could stop mass shootings before they happen. We could dismantle trafficking networks before they recruit more victims. This isn't science fiction. It's reality." His offer was clear. He wanted the Chen Foster Foundation to be the independent ethical oversight partner for Prometheus. They'd have full access to the algorithm, veto power over its applications, and help craft rules to ensure it served humanity's good. "I have the tech," Silas said. "You have the conscience. Together, we can usher humanity into a new era of safety." The proposal was a ticking bomb on the table. That night, their family had its most intense discussion yet. "This is the slipperiest slope of all," Leo said immediately, speaking as a lawyer. "Who defines high-risk behavior? What happens to people flagged as criminals who haven't done anything? We're talking about erasing innocent until proven guilty." Surprisingly, Chloe saw it differently. "But if we say no, he won't stop," she countered. "Someone like Silas Vance will find another way, maybe partnering with a government less concerned with ethics." "Wouldn't it be better if we're inside, holding the reins, ensuring it's not abused?" Chloe's words showed maturity and strategic thinking, but they unsettled Clara. Their father, David, who'd listened quietly, finally spoke. "History teaches us that every path to tyranny is paved with good intentions. They always start by promising safety for a sliver of freedom, but the price keeps growing." All eyes turned to Clara. As the Foundation's soul, the final decision was hers. She was torn. As an engineer, she was captivated by Prometheus's complexity and potential. She knew it could save lives, but as someone destroyed by unchecked power, she understood its dangers better than anyone. The next day, Clara met Silas Vance again. She delivered her decision. "Mr. Vance," she began respectfully, "we're in awe of your technological achievement, and we believe your intentions are entirely good." She paused, meeting his eyes. "But we can't join you on this project." Surprise flickered across Silas's face. "Our Foundation's mission is to empower people, not predict their failures," Clara continued, her voice heavy with conviction. "We protect innovation, but we won't be a stamp of approval for a future we don't believe in. A future where safety is traded for the freedom to choose whether to do right or wrong is too costly. We refuse to pay that price." Silas Vance listened intently. When Clara finished, he wasn't angry. He smiled, a cryptic, slightly condescending smile. "I understand," he said. "A pity. You have a kind heart, Miss Croft. But hearts can't stop history's march." He stood, extending a hand. "Thank you for your time. I truly hope we don't end up on opposing sides in the future." As Silas Vance left, Clara watched him go. She and her family had made the right choice, grounded in their core principles. They'd passed their own ethical test. But Silas's final words lingered like an ominous prophecy. They hadn't made a new enemy, but they'd staked a position against a force, an ideology about the future, larger and less predictable than any individual. The fight to reclaim the past was over. The battle to shape the future, it seemed, had only just begun. Life at the Chen Foster Foundation and in Clara's family flowed with a cautious peace. Silas Vance's words, "The future is coming, with or without your approval," loomed like a storm cloud on the horizon. They knew it was there, but not when it would strike. They pressed on, aiding young innovators, safeguarding fragile ideas, and rebuilding bridges within their family. Clara and Chloe's relationship had deepened into a profound understanding, allowing them to work as equal partners, each bringing unique strengths. Then, 6 months after that fateful meeting, the storm hit. It didn't start with an official announcement or a grand launch. It began as things do in the 21st century, a viral fever on social media. A new app, Aegis, appeared on app stores. Its logo, a blue shield, and its slogan, "Peace at your fingertips," were instantly alluring. Aegis didn't advertise heavily. It simply worked. Users downloaded it, granted location access, and it displayed a real-time map of their surroundings. But this map didn't show restaurants or gas stations. It showed risk zones. Using a commercialized version of Silas Vance's Prometheus algorithm, Aegis analyzed public and anonymized data to assign a security risk score to every neighborhood, building, even city block. Green meant safe, yellow meant caution, red meant high risk. At first, it was a curiosity. People downloaded it to check their area's color. But then the media took notice. A robbery hit a convenience store. Reporters checked Aegis and splashed headlines, "Robbery in red zone," flagged by Aegis weeks earlier. A bar brawl broke out. Aegis had marked this area high violence risk for weeks. Fear is the fastest spreading virus. Soon, Aegis's risk scores became part of social life. Delivery drivers refused to enter red buildings. Parents banned kids from yellow parks. Rents in green areas skyrocketed, while small businesses in red zones withered from lack of customers. A new form of discrimination, a digital social divide, was born, driven by a mysterious algorithm no one truly understood. In their Austin home, Clara's alliance gathered once more. But this time, their enemy wasn't a person or a corporation. It was an idea rooted in communal fear. "He didn't lie," Clara said, staring at the red and green map dividing the city on her screen. He didn't need government approval. He handed the weapon straight to the public and let panic do the rest. "It's a marketing masterstroke," Chloe analyzed, her eye for manipulation sharp. He didn't say, "Fear your neighbor." He said, "Protect your family." He's not selling discrimination. He's selling peace. He's turned paranoia into a consumer product. And it's a legal nightmare, Leo added. How do you sue an algorithm? How do you prove you were denied a job not for your skills, but because you live in a red zone? They faced a multi-headed beast. No single strategy could defeat it. They needed a multi-front assault. "All right," Clara said, standing. "Then we fight on multiple fronts." Her gaze swept over her family. "Leo, you'll lead the legal front. Find the first victims. People tangibly harmed by Aegis. We need to build a class action lawsuit." Leo nodded, his face resolute. "Chloe," Clara turned to her sister. "No one understands media and messaging like you. I need you to lead the communications front. Find the human stories behind these numbers. Show the world the faces of those unfairly judged by this algorithm. Expose Silas Vance's fear-based marketing." Chloe met her sister's eyes, seeing absolute trust for the first time. "I'm on it," she said. "And you," Clara looked at her father, "we need the voice of history, of wisdom." "Right, Dad. Write about past times when society traded freedom for false safety. Remind people of fear's true cost." "And you?" Chloe asked. "What will you do?" Clara took a deep breath. "I'll do what scares me most," she replied. "I'll step into the spotlight." She looked at them all. This algorithm's greatest ally is ignorance. People fear it because they don't understand it. I'll be the one to explain. I'll go on TV, give interviews, write articles. I'll crack open Prometheus's black box for the world, exposing its biases, flaws, and the danger of blindly trusting lines of code. It was a declaration of war. The battle would no longer unfold in closed boardrooms or secure servers. It was about to play out on national airwaves, in newspapers, and in the minds of millions. Days later, Clara agreed to a live debate on a major news channel, facing one of Aegis's staunchest supporters. In the green room before going on air, her heart raced. She wasn't a politician or a public figure. She was an engineer. But seeing her family there, looking at her with unwavering belief, she knew she wasn't fighting alone. "You're not fighting alone," her father said, resting a hand on her shoulder. Clara nodded. She took a deep breath as the studio doors opened. Blinding lights hit her face. The camera faced her, its red light blinking on. It was live. The world was watching. And Clara knew that what she was about to say might be the most critical code she'd ever write. The studio lights blazed. Millions watched. Across from Clara sat Dr. Alastair Finch, a renowned sociologist and fervent Aegis supporter. He went first, armed with charts and statistics, touting falling crime rates in Aegis-using areas, painting a safer future for children. His argument was logical, compelling, powerful. When Clara's turn came, she didn't use charts. She looked straight into the camera, into millions of viewers, and told a story. "Dr. Finch talks numbers," she began, her voice calm but weighty. "I want to talk people. Last week, our foundation got a letter from a preschool teacher. She was fired. Not for poor performance, but because her apartment building went from yellow to red on Aegis. The school said they couldn't take that risk for their students." She paused, letting the story sink in. They say algorithms have no bias. But who teaches them? They learn from a world already steeped in bias. Imagine a self-driving car trained only on sunny California suburbs. Would you trust it to navigate a narrow, snowy mountain road in Colorado? The Prometheus algorithm is no different. It's trained on past data, so it will forever drag past injustices into the future. It doesn't predict crime. It legitimizes suspicion. She ended with a simple question. Do we want a world where our safety is built on distrusting our neighbors, or one built on trust and community? Aegis promises safety, but its price is the soul of our society. The debate didn't spark instant change, but it was a flashpoint. For the first time, a credible voice offered a reasoned counter to Aegis's allure. Clara gave millions quietly doubting a language for their unease. That's when the Croft-Chen family's war machine kicked into gear. Fueled by the debate, Chloe's media campaign exploded. She didn't just find the preschool teacher's story, she uncovered dozens more. A father denied a home loan, a student evicted from a dorm. Chloe didn't pitch them as sob stories. She packaged them into a powerful campaign with the hashtag #IamNotARiskScore. It became a global phenomenon. Meanwhile, Leo, on the federal courthouse steps, announced a class action lawsuit against Silas Vance's company, backed by dozens of victims. He didn't just sue for discrimination, he sued for false advertising, selling a safe product that caused widespread social harm. Clara's father, David, published an op-ed in the New York Times titled "Safety at the Cost of the Soul." With a historian's insight, he compared Aegis to surveillance tools of past tyrannies, reminding readers that fear is the most effective weapon for stripping freedom. Public opinion began to shift. Protests erupted. Activists, scholars, even celebrities spoke out. Silas Vance's company stock plummeted. Peace at your fingertips became a mocking phrase. The final blow came from where it had to, Washington, D.C. Under public pressure and a brewing social crisis, the Senate held an emergency hearing on predictive technology and civil rights. Silas Vance was summoned. Before the nation's cameras, facing tough questions from senators, Silas's confidence finally wavered. He could argue tech, but not human stories or the evidence of chaos his product caused. Weeks after the hearing, a bipartisan bill, the Algorithm Accountability Act, passed at record speed, imposing strict regulations on predictive tech for civilians. Effectively, it neutered Aegis. They had won. 1 year later, Clara wasn't on a stage or in a boardroom. She stood in a community center in a neighborhood once labeled red, watching Chloe teach teens digital media skills. The Chen Foster Foundation now not only protected creators, but actively healed tech social wounds. Leo and her father were nearby, planning a community garden. Peace had returned, but it was a tempered peace, deeper and more meaningful. Clara's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. She opened it. One line. You were right about the heart. But the future's still coming. It's just taking a different path. SV Clara smiled faintly, pocketing the phone. Silas Vance might be right. The future and its challenges would always come. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She looked at her family, her lawyer husband, historian father, strategist sister. They weren't just family. They were a team. She realized that, after all the battles, betrayals, and revenges, the final lesson was simple. The strongest system, the most effective algorithm for facing any future challenge, wasn't built from code or data. It was built from trust, compassion, and the family you chose to fight alongside. And that foundation, she knew, could never be hacked. 3 years after the war against Aegis, the salty breeze of San Francisco Bay tugged at Clara's auburn hair as she stood on a Sausalito hill, gazing at the city across the water. The Golden Gate Bridge loomed, fiery red in the afternoon sun, still dreamlike in its beauty. But now looking at it, Clara no longer felt the sting of a false proposal. She felt only a profound peace. Beside her, Leo draped an arm gently around her shoulder. They'd returned to San Francisco, not to flee or confront the past, but as honored guests at a global conference on ethics and technology, where Clara was the keynote speaker. How's it feel to be back? Leo asked softly. Strange, Clara admitted, like watching an old movie about someone else's life. Everything's familiar, but the emotions are completely different. From behind, her father, David, and Chloe approached. David, though slower in step, had eyes sharper and happier than ever. Chloe had grown into a confident young woman, now heading the Chen Foster Foundation's strategic communications. That building, Chloe pointed to a glass skyscraper in the financial district. Momentum Dynamics' old headquarters. It's some other companies now. They looked in silence. No one mentioned Ethan. His name had vanished from headlines, sinking into the oblivion feared most by those chasing power and fame. He'd become a faint footnote in Silicon Valley's history. I still remember our apartment, Chloe said, her voice low, where you created Nexus. And where She didn't finish. It's also where I decided to leave, Clara continued gently, without a trace of blame. And that was the best decision I ever made. If I hadn't left, I wouldn't have made it to Austin. I wouldn't have met Leo. I wouldn't have everything we have today. She turned to her sister. Sometimes, a collapse is the start of building a stronger foundation, isn't it? Chloe nodded, eyes glistening. Thank you, Clara, for giving me a chance to help build it. I'm proud of you both, David said, resting a hand on each daughter's shoulder. You took the most painful shards and built something even more beautiful than before. They stood there, 4 people, a family forged not just by blood but by choice, forgiveness, and a shared battle. They no longer viewed the city with fear or bitterness. They saw it as an adult sees an old school, a place of memories, good and bad, that taught them invaluable lessons to become who they are today. That evening, after Clara's conference speech, a talk not just about tech but about compassion and creators' responsibility, a young woman approached her backstage. Miss Croft, she said, clutching a tablet. Your speech, it gave me courage. I have an idea, but I'm terrified it'll be stolen. Clara looked at the young woman, seeing her younger self in those eyes, full of passion, ambition, and fear. But this time, things were different. Clara smiled, a warm, empowering smile. Don't be afraid, she said. Tell me about your idea. You're not fighting alone. She glanced back at her family waiting in the distance, knowing it was the truest, most beautiful reality. Her journey had come full circle. From a lone creator stripped of everything, she'd become a guardian of others' dreams. The shadows of the past would never fully vanish, but they held no power over her anymore. She'd learned that the greatest weapon against darkness wasn't revenge or power, but the light you create, not just for yourself, but to guide those walking behind you. And that light, ignited by love and courage, could never be extinguished.